Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the 21st chapter in Luke's Gospel. We took this chapter all the way up to the exact midway points, 38 verses. We covered the first 19. We'll take this one from 20 to 38. But the 21st chapter opens in the temple. This is connected to the 20th chapter where he gives... at first, he arrives there in the 19th chapter, and he stays there and does a few things. Entertains some controversies, tells a parable or two, and just establishes his authority and dominance over his antagonist. Then the court of the women, in the Jewish temple, there would have been 13 vestibules through which worshiping Jews could make their charitable or alms donations, their tithing to the temple or anything else, anything they went through. And there are the two types of people. There are the rich, collective people who gave out of abundance, and then there was also a poor widow who arrested the master's attention, and she put in all that she had. She had 2 small coins, but the lesson that is imparted is that it is not the portion of the giving, but the proportion. And he said, "Truly I say to you that this poor widow has put in more than all, for all these out of their excess have put in offerings for Elohim, but she out of her poverty has put it all that she had to live on." So the amount that the rich donated was greater because they had pockets full of money. This widow had no means of livelihood, no possible way of income. She was relying on the charity of strangers, and the widows are mentioned more times in the Gospel of Luke than in all chapters combined. And she out of her poverty. Now, this was an act of faith and devotion, and it is part of grace giving. Grace, by definition, extends to the blessing extends to one in spite of their unworthiness to receive it. So the temple was corrupt, and it was perverted, and it was polluted, but this widow still went through the act of obedience, and she gave all that she had, and because of that, she was recognized and exalted by the master. Now they're in the temple in the what is familiarly known as the Mount Olivet Discourse, because this is the site and designated location where Matthew and Mark more explicitly tell the discourse. Luke is not exactly clear. They're still in the temple, and one of the disciples marks at the physical beauty, the exterior edifice of it all, and he warns them, "These that you see, the days are coming in which not one stone shall be left upon another that shall not be thrown down." This was an imminent prophecy which would be fulfilled some 40 years later in the year 70 AD. The Romans did come in and did sack the city and burn the temple and raze it to the ground, and there hasn't been another temple since. And it happened exactly as he described it. So the future Roman Emperor Titus, who is the son of the current reigning Roman Emperor Domitian, came in and really laid down Judah flat. The zealot uprising got to them. And so he's speaking about 2 things in this chapter. One, he is speaking of the end times, and he's speaking of a more imminent prophecy. One of the things we like to look for is the echo in prophecy. And the disciples want to know, when is this going to happen, and what's the sign? How are they going to know? And he tells them that these pretenders, these imposters, these false messiahs will come claiming to be him, but they are not who they say they are, and he doesn't want them to be led astray. That indicates that the potentiality of deception is present even in the elect. Because what did we read in Matthew's 24th chapter? If possible, deceive the very elect. There's also going to be geopolitical turmoil and natural commotion, natural chaos. The environmental world is collapsing, and the rate of war, we're somewhat the world is a more peaceful place as a result of Trump being president, but there is still always the rumor of war and things of that nature. Then verse 10, "Then he said to them, Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom." That's exactly what happened to the Jews to provoke the wrath and the ire of their Roman masters. They rebelled against them. They launched a subversive uprising to reclaim their independence. It wasn't exactly clear what they hoped or thought they could accomplish through rebelling against the mightiest military on earth, but the conditions then are going to be similar in our own. There's going to be geopolitical turmoil, and just the balance of power is going to be all askew. And there shall be great earthquakes in various places, and famines, and deadly diseases. And there shall be terrors and great signs from the heavens, and there shall be great tempest. All these things combine all at once to, these are the signs of which they ask for. So these things, these rumblings, these necessary precursors or development are all part of the same path and plan of what if Providence has arranged to take place to put the capstone on the story of redemption. So all these unpleasant natural calamities, devastating diseases, famines, terrorism, and all these signs from the heavens, there'll be clear, visible miracles from the heavens, and it's going to be announced and shouted. So he's talking about a distant prophecy at this point with the end of that. But, he warns them that they would be dragged into the synagogues for their confession of their faith. But he tells them to make the most of the opportunity is for a reason that they are there. And it shall turn out to you for a witness. Normally you would think that they would think about what they would want to say because they have this opportunity for witness, but he tells them not to do that. Therefore resolve in your hearts not to premeditate on what to answer, for I shall give you a mouth and a wisdom which your adversary shall not be able to refute or resist. He's going to do their talking for them. He's going to give them the words to say, and it is more explicitly indicated as the ministry of the Spirit in Matthew, in Mark's account, but here he takes the personal aim. Now he and the Spirit are in harmony, in agreement. So in some sense, they both give the words and the wisdom that the enemies, the opposition, are going to be powerless to resist, powerless to dispute, powerless to refute, powerless to defeat, powerless to overcome. But, they're going to be betrayed. The division, the sort of division comes into their very homes, and some of the whole world's going to hate them, and some of them are going to be called to pay the price with their lives. And we are all called to pay the price in persecutions. But in the final verse, he says, possess your lives by your endurance. He who endures to the end shall be saved is, I think, the better version of this, but he says much the same thing here because endurance is an essential element if we want to keep our lives. He's talking about life in the eternal sense here. And the 20th verse, it is still in the he doesn't quite get to his own return, but he does offer insights as to what to expect when he returns, the second coming. And remember, the prophecy is echoes, so there's an immediate fulfillment and there's a yet-to-be fulfillment. And when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its weighing waste is near. The Romans were going to come. They were going to surround and besiege the city. The Zealot uprising was launched in 66 AD. The Romans had completely obliterated Jerusalem and the temple to the ground in the year 70 AD, and the Jewish nation and people and religion haven't quite recovered since. But because the early Christians had this prophecy and this message, they were privy. They escaped early, and they were spared of the destruction which was visited upon Jerusalem. So Jerusalem, there still was a Christian community, vibrant one in there, at least up until 70 AD. Then they probably returned, but Jerusalem was never quite the same after the sacking, the second sacking. It was equally as devastating and even more profound and permanently so than the razing of Jerusalem and the temple to the ground by the Babylonians, some close to 600 years earlier. Then let those in Judah flee to the mountains, and let those who are in the midst of her go out, and let not those who are in her fields enter her. In normal siege scenarios, the city had the protective walls. That's where the people would have gathered for their protection. But he's telling them to get out of the city because it's all going to be razed. The defenses are going to be feeble. They're going to be overrun. Nothing any of you can do about it. May as well get out of there while you can. Go to the mountains, flee to the mountains. The city's going to be scoured, and the armies are going to be there. They're going to find you if you remain in the protective walls. Get out of the protective walls, flee to somewhere where you are obscure, away from the attraction of an army. So the mountain would be a difficult terrain for an army, and they're not going to travel up there just to get a few renegade runaways who had the prudence and tact to get out when they saw these signs coming. Because these are the days of vengeance, to fill all that have been written. Vengeance on the nation, on the city of Jerusalem. They had already been especially afflicted with divine judgment in the year 586. This was the second bout. God was fed up for them killing his prophets, for killing his son. That was the ultimate act of rebellion. And so his vengeance and his righteous wrath was rightly and justly and righteously poured out on his own people because they had so missed the mark. He had sent himself, in a sense, to them. And they rejected him, they killed him, they crucified him, and they didn't make the most. So they provoked his wrath and ire and merited his vengeance and his righteous wrath. So this was divine vengeance and divine justice, and though there is never any separation between those two. And woe to those who are pregnant, and to those who are nursing children in those days, for there shall be great distress in the earth and wrath upon this people. You don't want to be nursing. It's an inopportune moment to have a young infant baby who is, the younger infants are, the more dependent on you they are. You literally can't go anywhere without, the newborn baby. But once they get to be 2 years old, you can trust them to crawl around and whatnot. But if you are nursing while the Romans are coming, while the armies are coming, while the city's going to be laid, you are unfortunate because it's going to be, you can run to protect yourself, but you cannot run with the child in your arms and hope to get away with you, because the wrath has been poured upon this people, and the wrath is indiscriminately afflicted on the innocent as well. And there's nothing sinful about giving life to children, and if it's just an unfortunate thing to be doing so at this time, because they're going to come here and they're going to get you. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are filled. This prophecy, incidentally, has an echo in the book of Revelation. I just recognize the age of the Gentiles. Now they come into the sacred city. I believe it is somewhere around the 11th chapter of that book, or in the vicinity thereof. And the age of the Gentiles is 3.5 years where they dominate the city of Jerusalem before the tribulation or the rise of the anti-Messiah even. But what does that have to do with this passage? And the answer to that is answered in the next verse. And there shall be signs. Signs. The age of the Gentiles began in 586 BM before Messiah. That's when Judah and Jerusalem ceased to be an independent sovereign nation. The age of the Gentiles, Gentile domination, they would not recover as an independent national entity until the year 1948. So the age of Gentiles is still to be fulfilled, and it's going to be with them to the end. But the Jewish people are promised of their survival. They will survive all the way till the unfolding of human history. And there shall be signs in the sun, in moons and stars, and on the earth anxiety of nations and bewilderness, at the roaring of the sea and agitation. So he's talking about, he's leading up to the second thing he's talking about, his own coming, his second coming, the return of the Son and Man. This is when he returns and the king establishes his kingdom. Thus is the prayer answered that we are instructed to pray for daily in the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come. It will be here when he comes here. and where a king goes, there too is his kingdom. But all these supernatural signs, these cosmic wonders will be at display and work and all across the sky and the heavens. All these wonderful things are going to be happening. The state of nations is going to be one of anxiety, and when it is ever not, but this will be an unusually intense state of anxiety between the nations, and the sound of the roaring of the sea and the agitation just literally all around them, over them, and subsuming them will provoke bewilderment and perplexity. Men fainting from fear and the hope of what is coming on the earth, for the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. The powers of the heavens shall be shaken. They were shaken when he was killed on the cross. All creation groaned in exquisite agony with the death of its creator, who the whole sky turned black, the sun came down, it was too early for nighttime, yet the temple curtain disintegrated. He tore down the temple, and all these things fell on the temple. So there was an omen. I think there was some injurious destruction to the temple when they crucified him, but they ain't seen nothing yet. But again, he's leading up to that which he more explicitly declares as his own return. So all these signs in the heavens and all these anxiety induced climate on earth that just causes fear and fainting will be accompanied by supernatural signs in the heavens. So all these things combining, they will have the full picture of what to know and what to expect and what to know, how to recognize it when it gets here. And then they shall see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and much esteem. So we learned that when he returns, he's going to come in a cloud. A cloud is a symbol and a physical representative of divine manifestation. Yahweh appeared in the form of a cloud to lead the wandering wilderness generation of the Exodus period. That is, and so the Son of Man is going to condescend, come down in a cloud. The physical Son of Man is going to be surrounded by clouds, and he's going to exude majesty, power, strength, esteem, honor, acclaim, everything else. The whole world's going to bow when he gets here, and every tongue is going to confess his divinity and his masterhood and his sovereignty and his supremacy and everything else. You may not bow down your knee today, but there's coming a day when you will. You will be forced to bow your knee, and that day we must all stand before him to be reckoned. And when these begin to take place, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. He is their redemption. He personified the ministry of redemption. That is the reason he came to earth. The Son of the Man came to seek and save those who are lost, to redeem them from the slavery of sin, the slavery of Satan, and the slavery of hell, and that dreaded destination. So he is our ticket through redemption, and apart from him, there is no real redemption. If we have the advanced revelation of what if we know it and reject it, then we're out of luck. But you can only look up and lift your heads and recognize him when he comes, the redemption. They will recognize the redemption in him. He is their redemption, and he's going to condescend in the form of a cloud in majesty and might, and his power will be proclaimed throughout the earth, from one end to the next, east to the west, all the way through. And he spoke a parable to them. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. A parable is unusual in this context because what we witness here is a teaching that is distinct, and it is a sermon of unambiguous, explicit declarations of expectations and prophecy. He is preaching a prophecy sermon. Or it's not, he's not exactly preaching, but he is teaching. But the parable is something that requires unraveling and unlayering. So there's no way he says what he means, and he means what he says when he describes all the chaos and calamities in the natural order, in the geopolitical arena, everything else that's going to get here. He is not speaking in vain, and he is not speaking a lie. But the fig tree, the fruit, the budding of the fig tree would have been recognized as the dawn of spring and the dawn of a new season, and hope for an abundant harvest that time of year. When they have already budded, observing it, you shall know for yourself that summer is now near. This is one of the ways the layperson could recognize that spring was here when these things were budding, and this was common knowledge, and this wasn't advanced agricultural. You didn't have to have a college degree in agricultural industry to know that stuff. And so much in the same way, we can recognize when spring is here by the greenness of the leaves and the filling and the flooding of the naked trees, the wood. So much in the same way, that is just another, perhaps more relatable sign, but that's how they know that summer is now near. So that this scene I just described was one how we recognize spring when it gets here. This one is for summer. So you also, when you see these take place, know that the kingdom of Elohim is near. So much in the same way, they can look at a bud and know that that spring is near, that summer is near, that it's going to be sunny and bright and everything else. When they see all these other things, these developments and these evolutions and these events and these experiences unfolding before their eyes, they will know it when they get here, when it gets here, and they will know how to respond. They will have the protective shield of prophecy, which protects us from the injury of Satan's strategies ahead. But the kingdom of Elohim is near, and the kingdom arrives when the king does. So where the king goes, there is the kingdom, and vice versa, and everything else. So that means he's coming. His footsteps are right around the corner. He's on the horse, the white horse of which you read of in the 19th chapter of Revelation, and he's revving up his armies. The heavens and the earth shall pass away. Truly I say to you, this generation shall by no means pass away till all shall have taken place. So remember, he's doing a dual prophecy. He's speaking of the imminent destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, but he's also speaking of his own return, which the original audience would have been led to believe, to expect in their own lifetimes. But he's now, as to his nearness, he is one day nearer than he is yesterday, and we don't know when he's going to get here. But now the fact that this present generation, most of them lived to witness, to see the destruction of the temple. Peter might not have made it. He was executed around 66, 68 AD. This event took place in 70 AD, but John, he was alive and well past 96 AD, so he would have witnessed it, and most of the others. But the Son of Man, by this generation, generation can also translate as race. So he's addressing the Jewish people who are guaranteed to survive till the end of human history. They will have a place on the earth, and they will have a plan and a vital ingredient in redemptive history. Truly the heavens and the earth shall pass away, but my word shall by no means pass away. I want you to appreciate the permanence. Permanence is an understatement, and eternality of the words that we are reading from this page. And everything in heaven and the earth will pass away. Everything in physical motion is designed and destined to decay and perish and to be reduced to dust. Everything in the heavens and on the earth, all the planets, all the galaxies, all the nebulas, every life form on earth, every rock, every formation, every physical desert, any geographical terrain is going to be swallowed whole. It's not going to last forever. It is not designed to do so. Everything that is in the universe is in flux, and it's in a process of decay and death. But his words, the words that created the universe, the ones that set it all in motion, they are connected. They belong to that which was in the beginning and before the beginning. He is pre-existent and eternal. And what he says, what he promises will not pass away. There's no ocean of change. The immutable truths of the gospel remain impervious to the onslaught against it by the rapid accelerated change in our culture. And take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down by gluttony and drunkenness and worries of this life, and that day comes on you suddenly. These are destructive distractions. Gluttony is the sin of overindulging in food or anything else. You can be a glutton for drugs. You can be a glutton for food. You can be a glutton for sex. You can, and drunkenness, it's not necessarily limited to alcohol alone, but also other illicit, intoxicating drugs and just the worries of this life, just to be plugged into the satanic system of anxiety that this world is designed to deliver, to be distracted by how much what you're leaving behind, your financial station, everything else, the state of the nation, the state of the world. But if you are distracted by these things, then you are going to be unprepared. So you got to keep your focus and concentration on the promise to recognize it when it gets here. If you are distracted by these vain, destructive, degenerate pursuits and counterproductive mindsets of being tied up and tied down by the worries of the age, you will miss the coming when it gets here. It's going to come on you suddenly. You're not going to be prepared. You're not going to be expecting it. You're not going to know what to do. For it shall come as a snare on all those dwelling on the face of all the earth. The all is a bit of an exaggeration, because those who have the redemptive recipe and the protection of prophecy, they will not be ensnared. They will be in pain from the persecution, certainly, but they will not be sucked in. They will not be ensnared. They will not be entrapped by the shortcuts that Satan will surround us with in temptations, because people in that day are going to be looking for, a redeemer and redemption, and they're not going to, in their desire to see so, they're going to be prone to the deceptions of the false messiahs and the imposters and the pretenders, of which we are warned of earlier in the chapter. Watch then at all times, and pray that you shall be counted worthy to escape all this about to take place, and to stand before the Son of Man. Watch, witness, work, wait. These are the 4 W's. These are our 4 obligations, duties, and standards to observe and obey in reference to the second coming at all times. So if we take a break, we can, be snooze. You snooze, you lose. Because once you get into the pattern of laziness, it just becomes a habit, and then it becomes an addiction. So watch at all times. Endurance, once more, is key and critical. All times, all day, every day, throughout the day. Pray always, and none of us are truly worthy to escape the righteous wrath of Elohim, which is all our due, all the consequences of us being sinners. But the judgment which was to come, they had the protection of prophecy, and if they escape the judgment, then they can embrace salvation. They have that to look forward to. They have that to expect. And though none of us are worthy to receive it, we cannot receive it in an unworthy manner, since none of us deserve it, none of us merit it, none of us earned it. And he was teaching in the temple by day, but at night he went out and stayed on the mountain of Olives. So Mark and Matthew, as I earlier mentioned, more explicitly reference this as the location of the discourse we have just concluded on. But Luke is not exactly clear whether it's in the temple or on the mount of, but he does say that he was teaching in the temple by day. There's no indication of any break between the widow throwing her coin in and then the question or the observation of the physical beauty of the temple. It may have been from the inside, it may have been from the outside. It would have been visible from the Mount of Temples, but that's in any case what launched it. But Luke does make clear and plain that he had this was the division of labor in his 24-hour cycles. He would go to the temple by day for the purpose of teaching, and he would retreat at night, and he would stay on the Mountain of Olives, not quite in Jerusalem, but close, across the Kidron Brook to the east. And early in the morning, all the people came to him in the temple to hear him. So wherever he went, people followed, people gathered. He had no difficulty or challenge attracting a crowd, and he taught with authority, and he spoke things. He had authority. He just had the authority. The scribes and the Pharisees, they could cite authority, and they relied on the authorities of others, but his authority came in himself, and it had an attraction, it had a magnetic lure, because people had never heard anything like it. They had never seen anything like the things that he was doing, and heard anything like the ones he was teaching. His teaching was profound, his teaching was depth, his teaching was righteous, his teaching is true. And we should gather around him, speaking to us in his voice through this word, the written word, as enthusiastically as the early Jewish audience gathered around the teacher and the rabbi when he was in the flesh in the temple in their midst. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.